In today's world, countless hours are spent dedicated to the ideas of equality, opportunity, and nothing more than anyone could ask for, simply life. This fantasy of equality, opportunity, and life was not just handed to those without. Many figures endured hardships to make these dreams into realities. However, one team, or I should say, one family, was able to endure those hardships and mend a racially frayed city that would speak out to many more and turn that fantasy into reality. In a time of continuous racial conflicts and unequal opportunity of the minority, Cripsus Attucks High School would stand against its purpose of separation and come to build a bridge between races throughout a whole city, make doctors, professors, generals, athletes, and show the academic and athletic achievements that African American students held potential for, and leave a legacy that the Hoosiers could stand by forever. Now let's rewind time and discover the roots of Cripsus Attucks and find out how it came to be. 1927, the not-so-grand opening of Cripsus Attucks High School. Now Cripsus Attucks was underway, 1,350 African American students would be enrolled into the new high school. Unlike any other high school, Cripsus Attucks was built not on the advancement and aspiration of fine education. This high school in particular was built for the segregation and an expectation for failure of African American students. Built to single them out, this high school was identified as a private school, but this was due to it being solely for African Americans, which included students and staff. This high school was just a product of the racially frayed city of Indianapolis alongside the Plessy-Ferguson case that was ultimately a big misconception. The Plessy-Ferguson case was a critical decision of the U.S. Supreme Court issued in 1896. It approved of the constitutionality of racial segregation laws for public facilities as long as the segregated facilities were equal in quality, a doctrine that would come to be known as separate but equal. Although it used the phrase separate but equal, this was far from its outcome.
We don't want them living next to us. We don't want them attending our schools. We certainly don't want them marrying our daughters or sons, and interracial marriage was prohibited in Indiana until the 1960s, actually. We just want them, if they're going to be here, they need to know their place. They need to know where their place is. As long as they stay in that place, that is, as second-class citizens, we'll tolerate them, but we're not going to embrace them. Every time I dig into the primary sources, into the records of history, focusing on issues of African American history and issues of race, the deeper I get, the more unhappy I become, sometimes depressed by the difficulties, by the challenges. The challenges created mostly by white Hoosiers and white Americans to keep African Americans off the agenda, to keep them separate, to keep them in second-class status. The other side of that is, the more I learn, the more I come to respect African Americans who worked to fight against that kind of discrimination, that kind of segregation. Because as I realized how difficult the fight was, how huge the barriers to success were placed by white Americans in front of African Americans, the more I realized how large the challenges were, the greater my respect for those who stood up and fought.
Although Cripsus Attucks' purpose was to belittle African Americans, the school board and students did not let failure become of them, as white Hoosiers expected. With the best teaching staff they could find, Cripsus Attucks was successful, very successful, in academics and athletics.
Americans know that we can succeed. We know we're smart. We know we have brains. We know we have all the abilities. We know we make contributions. But in that microcosm, people could see each other succeeding. There wasn't this glaze and gaze of somebody else looking on and judging and saying, you're not, you're going to fail, and putting obstacles in your way. Once they're inside that building, once they were inside those walls, there was somebody who cared about them and somebody invested in their success.
It's my foundation. Just like building a house, you gotta have the foundation or the house can't stand. So Cripsus Attucks was my foundation in mathematics. And I can't say that enough. That foundation in mathematics meant so much to me, I never could have advanced as I did without that foundation.
Through the intended tragedy, triumph would stand. Cripsus Attucks High School would stand against its purpose of separation and come to build a bridge between races throughout a whole city, and this time would soon come in the 1950s. In the 1950s, the Attucks boys basketball team stirred up a huge change. Before Attucks, no Indianapolis team had ever won the championship. Attucks made the Final Four between 1951 and 1957 at a consistent pace, and they would take the state title twice in as many years. The city's black newspaper and even the Indianapolis Recorder continued to express the tireless passion it had always shown Attucks. The white newspapers in Indianapolis and their audience were uncertain at first of supporting an all-black team, but eventually there was no reason not to show their support behind Attucks. In 1954 and 1955, Attucks would show their true potential on the court. The Cripsus Attucks Tigers went up against Gary Roosevelt in the final. This time, both were all-black teams, so racial advantage was not a factor. Under the leadership of their best player, Oscar Robinson, and their amazing coach, Ray Crow, Attucks defeated Roosevelt 97-74. They would then continue to go on and win again in the next year with an undefeated record. Both times, the team kept their tradition as they all piled onto a fire truck and drove from Butler Fieldhouse to Monument Circle. Walking the streets around them, blacks and whites stood together. The team took a single lap around the monument and then returned to the black neighborhoods to celebrate. The black neighborhoods of these players were impoverished, but joy was still brought to them through victory.
Maggie thought she was the lady on the block, and she really was. And she decided that she was going to get some indoor plumbing. And she had a toilet installed. Because we would use outhouses. It sounds like eons ago. When Miss Maggie got this toilet inside the house, everybody in the neighborhood on the street came to watch it flush. And Mr. Mays, who was 86 years old, I believe, he said, "A toilet in the house, how unsanitary. What would they think of next?"
Through the success of Attucks' championship-winning basketball team, Indianapolis was viewed by many other cities because of the accomplishments the black community put under the city name. But basketball was not the only, but one of the many achievements Cripsus Attucks made. Cripsus Attucks made doctors, professors, generals, athletes, and show the academic and athletic achievements that African American students held potential for. Through the events in Indianapolis, many more schools throughout the country, including white schools, came to see themselves recruiting African American students and athletes. Although not a short-term effect of Attucks' legacy, a steady movement at the integration of schools came into place. Cripsus Attucks was more than a school but a history of Indianapolis that left a legacy that Hoosiers could stand by for a long time to come. Hoosiers are now known for the great basketball history of Indianapolis, which emerged from Cripsus Attucks. Not only was a legacy of basketball left, but a legacy of unification was left behind. Attucks was able to unify blacks and whites on and off the court. That was something many other cities could not do, and that's what set Indianapolis apart. Cripsus Attucks brought many short-term effects to the community, and even the nation, speaking on a greater scale. As short-term effects, Attucks was able to bring together Indianapolis in a time of great racial conflict. Cripsus Attucks, a school intended to segregate African American students, was soon proudly chanted, "Indianapolis Cripsus Attucks." And African American athletes and students were seen for their talents and soon spread out through many schools, even white schools. However, the team itself, although cheered on by the community, did not receive a proper recognition from the city. As of long-term effects, Attucks was a push start at the integration of schools in not just Indianapolis but other cities too. Racial relations dramatically improved in what was once a racially frayed city, and a great legacy was given to Indianapolis. The question now is, will Attucks' legacy stand forever, and are African Americans truly recognized for what they have done?